What's up, guys? I'm EJ. I'm joined by Kendall, and thank you so much for checking out this edition of our virtual NBA Draft War Room. We're wrapping up the Northwest Division, talking about the Utah Jazz. Kendall, the Utah Jazz, a solid season, but it ended up being very tumultuous with the stoppage of play. It being started essentially by Rudy Gobert and him getting COVID and his, what's the word I'm looking for? Inappropriate approach to the pandemic in its earliest days ended up really driving a wedge, if not on the team, definitely with the team's star player, Donovan Mitchell. That seemed to be a relationship that needed to be mended. We think it's been mended, but we'll I guess end up seeing how things play out with his extension in the offseason, how that all ends up shaking out, and where Gobert ends up, considering he's also up for an extension potentially. So a season that was going along like usually a normal Jazz season ended up having a lot more drama than we are used to anticipating from that franchise. They did make it to the first round of the playoffs, but they had a heartbreaking loss in the first round after being up 3-1, and seeing Jamal Murray just make it I felt like every shot against them, and just really go into the Super Saiyan mode. We thought Murray was on a certain level, and then he took it to a whole different level in that series. Ended up bouncing the Utah Jazz in the series I think they thought they were going to win. So a kind of a weird season and a weird off season for the Jazz coming up here, Kendall.
Yeah, the Jazz. I'm not as there's been a lot of negative sentiment around the Jazz. I'm not as doom and gloom. I think the Gobert thing, I don't think will be. I don't know if the COVID thing will have any impact. It for a while it did seem like that was going to be the case, but seems like everything we saw in the bubble seemed positive. No pun intended, of course, but um, but we are in a situation where look, everything again doom and gloom, but we're talking about a Jazz team that was still one play away, one shot from Mike Conley from beating that Nuggets team. We forget about it because the Nuggets went on that had that upset against the Clippers, and but that Jazz team, probably should have won that game, and they gave it away. So, Donovan Mitchell obviously kind of planted his flag as a borderline superstar in the league during that series, and again, the Gobert thing, if he gets moved, I don't know if it'll have to do anything with COVID. Maybe it will, but there are basketball questions about how does he fit on this team going forward, and what could you get for Rudy Gobert? So those are questions that they'll have to ask. But no, this pick is big, and I think Dennis Lindsey has been one of the better drafters in the league recently. I mean, obviously the Mitchell pick is the one where you're like, wow. I mean, he discovered Mitchell kind of before anyone else in the league, and really, told Mitchell early in the draft process, don't do anything else because we're going to draft you. So, and they traded up to get Mitchell. So look, this is a Jazz team that you always want to pay attention to who they're looking at, because obviously Walt Perrin is now with the Knicks, who was also a big factor in that. But you always want to pay attention to who they're looking at.
And just on that Mitchell thing, real quick, I think Lindsey also deserves a credit because obviously they wanted to re-sign Gordon Hayward, but Lindsey also had the foresight to be like, once Hayward moved on, they were like, this is this young kid's team early.
Yep.
Early for a guy who was a fringe lottery pick.
It was easy for him to do that based on how he played in that summer league, but yes.
But it was still a risk, and people forget that first month for Mitchell was incredibly rough. It looked like, man, this looks like a terrible idea, and he ended up having, of course, a sensational rookie season. And Lindsey trusting the player, trusting his scouting, trusting the player development, that whole situation, and Mitchell become the player he's become just through his own hard work and dedication. Just a feel-good story over there in Utah. So let's continue to talk about the Utah Jazz heading into this offseason. The Utah Jazz finished with a record of 44-28 again. The season, before the restart ended with a little bit of strife. They did end up still making the playoffs, and as Kendall said, they were just one very, very close shot from Mike Conley away from advancing to the Western Conference semifinal, but they were bounced by the Nuggets. They own pick number 23. That is the only pick they have in this draft. For team needs, I put point guards. Look, Mike Conley, he did play much better in the restart. So I want to give credit where credit is due there. But he was having an awful season before the games were suspended. He was starting to look a little old. He was starting to look like maybe he should be more of a backup or a change of pace kind of guard. He did not look like a starting caliber point guard in those first, 35 or 40, however many games he played, some odd games. He definitely looked like a different player in the in the bubble. He still had a ton of problems, obviously handling Jamal Murray, but still played a little bit better. I think that's a position that they're still gonna have to figure out. Emmanuel Mudiay is a backup that is clearly not. He's not a starter. So and he's a free agent, so they're gonna have to figure out what the backup point guard is going to be anyway. So point guard, 100% a huge need for this team. I put secondary scorers as well. You could convince me that Mitchell in these playoffs may have shown that he really can be a primary scorer on a championship caliber team, or at least a championship contender. I'm not convinced they have a number two. I do understand that number two did not make it to the bubble. Bogdanovich elected not to play and elected to get surgery, a surgery that he did need. But he was having a tremendous season. He's having 20 points, best season of his career. The foresight of putting him at a small ball four was really great coaching by Quinn Snyder and obviously once again Dennis Lindsey. But to me, Bogdanovich, you could convince me maybe he could be a three. I don't know if he's your number two as a scorer. So I think that a secondary scorer next to Mitchell is needed. I'm not sure you can get that 23, but it is a need, so I wanted to put that down there. And I put front court depth because I think, outside of Gobert, and obviously again you're playing Bogdanovich at the four, George Yang, good shooter, skilled player, but I'm not sure if that's a guy that should be getting a lot of minutes. Bradley was playing a lot of minutes. I don't know if he's not necessarily the guy I think should be getting that kind of minutes on a championship caliber team. Ed Davis' experiment really didn't work. He didn't play a lot for them on this team. So besides Gobert, that front court is not up to snuff in my opinion for a team that's trying to compete in the Western Conference, compete for a championship. So they need to improve the depth there, and I think overall the athletic profile can improve for this team as well. This is a team that is a little bit older than I think people realize. Ingles older, Bogdanovich older, Conley older. A lot of their key players on this team are older. I know, obviously Mitchell is young and extremely athletic, but everyone else on the team, I look at them as almost.
Even Royce O'Neal's like pretty much in his prime at this point.
Right, he's 27, I think. Right, so and everyone on the team I look at as almost minus athletes, with the exception of Gobert and Mitchell. They're not an athletic team. I'm not saying you got to be super athletic, but I think it couldn't hurt to help the profile of that part of the team. So those are the team needs I have. Quickly going through the free agents. Jordan Clarkson, we didn't mention, did actually have a great season as their sixth man. He's a free agent. He could get a big payday. Shout out to Clutch Sports. Emmanuel Mudiay, also a free agent. He was their backup point guard. Juwan Morgan, Justin Wright Foreman, and Jarrell Brantley also.
Wright Foreman.
Shout out to Queens.
Stand up.
Shout out to Springfield Gardens, Queens. And Jarrell Brantley, also free agents. And of course, again, Lindsey is the man in charge, the executive vice president of basketball operations. So Kendall told me before we did this video that you had this pick zeroed in, lined up for a long time. I don't know who it is, so I'm very excited. Who do you think that the Jazz absolutely should be targeting with this pick at number 23?
So you convinced me during your wonderful monologue about the Jazz's team needs that there are other places that they could go. I think if you look for a big, you breaking down the fact that the depth at the big spot being such a weakness. I really like Isaiah Stewart in this draft, and I think that he's somebody that can really help. But he's not the guy that I was talking about. The guy I was talking about, you mentioned the point guard depth. It's an obvious issue. And to me, a guy that's being really slept on in this draft process, that is almost certainly at this point going to be there, that I think would be an excellent fit for the Utah Jazz, is Theo Maledon, point guard out of France, who I think, again, being extremely undervalued, gives you a big 6'5" point guard that can help you not only, obviously, we could talk about his offensive impact, but I like his size defensively playing next to Mitchell, who is a little undersized at the two-guard position. Because of the offensive load that he carries, you never really want him guarding the other team's best guard if he doesn't have to. And And this Jazz team, they need a mature point. They need a mature presence at the point guard position. That's why they brought in Mike Conley, but Mike Conley is, I don't know. It would be nice to Mike Conley. He didn't have a great year last year, so and obviously we know his issues with injuries. So there are point guards in the draft that may offer more upside, may be more exciting. I know we've talked a lot about Tyrell Terry. We've talked about R.J. Hampton, quite a bit. We've talked about Nico Mannion, whose dad used to play for the Utah Jazz, so I'm sure that'll certainly fly well with the fan base. But the to me, none of those guys offer the maturity at the position that Theo Maledon has, given his experience playing with and against pros for years now. And that's something that we've seen throughout the years. Guys who have that experience don't come into the league shell shock. And I obviously don't want to just use the Luka Doncic example, but it's a lot of European players that we've seen in years past. Dario Saric being another guy that came in like that. Ricky Rubio, who obviously the Jazz have an affinity for. I think he gives you the playmaking, the defense. He's not a great shooter. He's not a great scorer. But you don't need that because you have Donovan Mitchell. And I know you made the case that maybe you do need someone else besides Donovan Mitchell, which is a fair thing to ask. And I do wonder who else can you get at 23 that's really going to help you in that regard. That also offers you the floor general that they lack. Like Cole Anthony could give you the scoring and he might be there, but I just worry about how's the offense being run if Cole Anthony's running the show. So, I think Theo Maledon could go to Utah and be their starting point guard by the All-Star break or whatever that looks like this year.
It's funny. We've done 25 videos, Kendall, and I think this is one of the very few, and maybe the only one where we are deadlocked here. I 100% agree with this pick. I only wrote one player down as my targets, and that was Theo Maledon after doing a lot of consulting. I do think point guard is the need. So when I thought about the point guards who'd be available, to me, he almost in some ways seemed like the only fit based on how they
That's
play.
What I'm saying.
Because there are a couple of things. So the Utah Jazz run a very, very, it's kind of complicated, but they run a very effective motion offense. Their offense involves a lot of guys handling the ball, not just the point guard.
Yes.
It's why Rubio and Conley were in theory really good fits, because they were smart players who moved well without the ball, but you also weren't guys that you were gonna need super high usage rate out of. You didn't want it. To me, this is not the kind of team I want a point guard who his effectiveness is going to be based on his usage rate being through the roof. Because that's one, Mitchell's going to be the guy that's going to get most of those touches. And even Mitchell plays very much in the offense. It's just a free-flowing offense, and I don't need that point guard to be that dominant of a figure. But he's got to be confident. And again, we are going to be nice to Mike Conley. He's been a great player in this league for a long time. The first half of the season, he was not confident at the position. They needed He was now again, the fairness to him, he was very confident in the bubble, and he was very confident in the playoffs. You hope that you can get that Conley next season with him being back, because I didn't even list him in the free agents. He technically can opt out. That's not happening at $34 million. So so you hope that you still get that from him. And if maybe you don't, maybe it's in a different role. Like I said, maybe it's a backup point guard. But the fit with Maledon makes the most sense, because I think that Maledon is a player, again, size, so he can guard other positions that maybe guys that you don't want Mitchell guarding. He's a point guard that's not a ball dominant point guard. He can play without the ball. He doesn't need to be the guy who's handling the ball 99% of the time.
Capable shooter, so he can space the floor.
Yes, he can shoot the ball, so you don't have to worry about him not being a floor spacer when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. And he's mature. And working in an offense where it's just not going to be handed to you for you to make all the plays, knowing when to pick your spots. We see him do that already in France. So I think this is, I wouldn't be, I've not, maybe I should have, but I haven't done read a million articles on what the Jazz are doing in regards to who they're targeting. If I learned after this draft process that Lindsay zeroed in on Maledon very early on, and that's the guy they went for.
He gave him a promise in February.
Yeah, that would not surprise me, because I think to me the fit seems very crystallized that that's the guy I would go for.
And so Now you understand why I've known for
Yeah,
months
I get it.
who I was gonna pick. I
Yeah,
mean, there are times I like I mentioned Theo Maledon in one of our previous years. I think it was the Bucks, and I was like, yeah, there's a team in the West that I think is a much better fit. It was the Utah Jazz,
right.
and it's. I mean, again, we'll see what happens. Again, there's a lot of point guards in this draft. It could be
Yeah,
RJ Hampton if they really want to do the Dante Exum thing again. You could look at RJ Hampton. If they want.
trust me. I don't think any
Um,
Jazz fans want anything to do with Dante Exum. So
well,
if that's your pitch to them,
yeah,
I'm sure the people listening are saying hell no.
yeah. Look, I think a guy that I mean, look, I know I'm always pulling the who's the local guy. I'm the Robert Sarver of New Generation Media. It's like, all right, so who's the local guy that they can look at? Will there be momentum for people that want Sam Merrill from Utah State? You mentioned the shooting and the scoring as being something that the Jazz are going to need next to Mitchell.
And I also mentioned, look again, Ingles getting up there in age, Bogdanovich
Yeah,
getting up there in age. Those
yeah,
players, even if they have a good year or two left, I don't think 3 years from now those guys are going to be the
yeah,
kind of guys that are out there if they even be on the team. So I think
and
there will definitely will be fans that will like Sam Merrill for sure.
yeah,
And I think
especially
he's a great offensive fit with what he does for what they do.
Yeah, especially, and look, I mean, I like Sam Merrill enough to where if they draft him at 25, I wouldn't call him crazy. But, if, I mean, they certainly could probably give him a second round if they bought a pick or made a move to dump somebody to get a second round pick, and I think that, there's going to, like, Mitchell is interesting because, like, I think Mitchell long term could wind up being a point guard, which sounds crazy. But again, in that system, if you have a two guard that can also handle the ball like Merrill can and can facilitate and make plays, I mean, Merrill might as well have been Utah State's point guard at times. And if you have another guard next to Mitchell like that, he's so ball dominant at times
Well,
that
yeah,
like
I mean, we didn't see it as much this year because they had Conley, but I mean, again, Joe Ingles has almost been a point guard for them in a
yeah,
lot of
Joe Ingles as
situations.
well. Because like you said, the system runs itself. You don't really
Exactly.
you don't need a point guard to
Yeah,
pound the ball for 20
it's
seconds.
a very it's a very true to form motion offense.
Yeah,
It's not that, yeah, of course you're gonna vary some things and let the great players like Mitchell do their thing, but they do stick true to form with really trusting where the offense is supposed to go. It's
yeah,
very unique considering how most other teams play. Because of that, the idea of having this crazy ball dominant point guard just isn't necessary.
the,
Not when you have a guy like Mitchell who's that dominant and that dynamic. You
the
know.
Isaiah Stewart thing I think is interesting though because I think he would be. I mean, first of all, New York guy similar to Mitchell. Um, So I think I feel like a guy that would step in right away and be like a guy that plays 20 minutes for them, 25 minutes for them. When you talk about the backup bigs that they have,
Yeah,
like Isaiah Stewart,
trust me, the minutes are there.
yeah, the minutes are there. Like
The
he's gonna
minutes are
step in
there
right
for
away,
someone to come in.
and he's the second best big on the team. Like he's been. Isaiah Stewart's a very high floor player in this draft. I think like I find it hard to believe if he doesn't pan out. To me, it's simply because he's a dinosaur. And I think he's too good at this point to be that much of a dinosaur. He may not be a superstar. It's similar to when like DeJuan Blair was coming out of Pitt, and we knew, all right, DeJuan Blair, he's only going to be but so bad. Like, yeah, he's an undersized college power forward, but like he plays too hard. He's too good of a rebounder, too good of a finisher on the rim. That's where Isaiah Stewart kind of comes in, and I think playing in this Jazz system, I think he would be really good. Like you said, the minutes are there. Like he's a better, younger Ed Davis. So if they went that route, if they felt comfortable at the guard position, or if they had a free agent they were targeting at the guard position, then Isaiah Stewart seemed like a really good fit as well.
And if they didn't, if somehow Maladon wasn't there, which is possible at 23, though it does sound like he's slipping. One, I think, damn, that's tough. Cause I think that's the guy they really should want. But if there was a guard, the closest I could think of to a good fit, I think, and funny, when you talked about local, first I thought maybe we were going to go this route, but Malachi Flynn did play in that Mountain West, and I
Yeah,
think that he could be a decent alternative. He is still a guy who kind of operates best in pick and roll, but he's a very good shooter. He's comfortable off the ball. So if you couldn't get Maladon, and the problem is the size. You don't solve that issue. But he's 6'1", Mitchell's 6'3", 6'2", so you still have a small backcourt.
when you
But I still think
uh,
Malachi Flynn could work in that style of offense. It would take away some of his creativity on pick and roll, which is what he's best at. But I think he still has the skill set to make that fit work. Last thing, Kendall.
Yeah, no, yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that fit as well. When you said local, I know BYU, I know Utah fans are gonna get this, but I thought you were gonna say TJ Hawes. I was like, whoa, EJ. I know
Yeah,
you're a
no,
Gonzaga
no.
fan, but I don't know if TJ Hawes is going in the first round.
No, shout out to TJ Hawes
the,
again. It's a
the
Gonzaga fan. I've
28 year
watched him a
old,
bunch,
you know,
but no,
superstar point guard at BYU.
no, I was not saying that. Shout out to TJ Hawes. But yeah, no,
He'll
I
get,
think
yeah,
that I
he'll
think
get a G League workout. He's a good player.
but I do think Flynn could be a decent alternative to Maladon if he's not there. What do you guys think the Kings should do? The Jazz should do? Do you think that they should zero in on the point guard like we say? Do you agree that Maladon is 100% the guy they should be looking at? Is there a different point guard? You think that the Kings? Oh, why do I call them the Kings? This is late tonight. I'm sorry, guys. The Jazz should be. Do you think there's another point guard the Jazz should be looking at in this upcoming draft? Make sure you leave a comment what you think they should do. Make sure also you like this video if you did enjoy it, and make sure you subscribe to this channel, New Generation Media. So thank you for watching this breakdown on the Utah Jazz. Make sure I got that right before we got out of here. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.